Okay, it's Sunday, March 15, 2020, and this is the 5-minute podcast review. And I've got just one podcast to talk about this episode. So, in the last couple of days, the world, particularly the Western world, seems to have finally woken up to the seriousness of the coronavirus threat. And the podcast I want to talk about is called the Jolly Swagman Podcast, and in particular, a recent episode called In the Foothills of a Pandemic. It's a conversation between the host and Yanir Bar-Yam, a physicist who specializes in complex systems, and it explains in a rational, science-based way why we need to take the threat of coronavirus seriously. It explains how so many people, including seemingly governments, haven't fully grasped the implications of infection numbers that are doubling every 5 days or so. In mathematical terms, it's called a geometric progression, and if left unchecked, it only takes 2 months or so for something like 70% of the population to be infected. And with a 3 to 4% mortality rate, the number of deaths in that scenario would be in the tens of millions. As is compellingly explained in the podcast, the only way to prevent this kind of catastrophe is the swift lockdown of the population and the cancellation of all events and gatherings. Finally, this seems to be happening with all major sporting events cancelled in the US, and here in Melbourne, the Grand Prix cancelled that was supposed to be on this weekend. It was cancelled just at the very last minute. And this and much more is exactly the kind of thing the podcast explains needs to happen. But if it had all happened a month ago, as experts were warning, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. Anyway, just listen to the podcast and share it with friends and family, particularly any who are skeptical. It's a 2-hour and 10-minute podcast, but you can skip the first hour to get to the guts of it. So again, it's called the Jolly Swagman Podcast. I've stuck a link on your screen, and while you're there, you should check out the other episodes. It's a brilliant podcast, and I pretty much mean that literally. The host, Joe Walker, is a Mensa member, and all the episodes are unabashedly intellectual, often long, sometimes up to 3 hours, but that allows subjects to be explored in depth, often with lengthy sidebars to fully flesh out the understanding of a topic. Listening to the Jolly Swagman podcast, despite the lightweight sound of the name, is actually a heavyweight workout for your brain, so hopefully a new podcast to get stuck into. And as I said, right now there's no better introductory episode than the coronavirus episode, episode 81, called In the Foothills of a Pandemic. There's a direct link to the episode on your screen, so before you forget, go and download it right now. Okay, that's it. Stay safe, and I'll see you with a few more podcast suggestions in the next episode. Thanks for listening.